The morning sun cast long shadows across the concrete training facility as Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison watched his SEAL Team 6 prepare for another grueling day. 20 years in the Navy had taught him to read men like open books, and today he sensed something different in the air. The usual pre-training banter felt forced, mechanical even. His team of 12 elite operators moved through their equipment checks with the precision that had kept them alive through countless missions, but their eyes kept drifting toward the observation deck. She stood there like a statue carved from determination itself. Dr. Sarah Chen, all 5 feet 4 inches of her, clipboard in hand, watching their every move with the intensity of a hawk studying prey. The Pentagon had sent her to evaluate their unit's psychological readiness for a classified operation that would push the boundaries of human endurance. What they hadn't expected was someone who looked like she belonged in a university lecture hall rather than observing the deadliest fighting force on the planet. Petty Officer First Class Marcus Tank Rodriguez spat into the sand beside the obstacle course. At 6'6" and weighing 260 pounds of pure muscle, he dominated every physical challenge the Navy could devise. His biceps strained against his training shirt as he adjusted his gear harness, shooting glances at the woman above them. "Still can't believe they sent some college professor to check if we're tough enough," Tank muttered to his teammate, Petty Officer Second Class Danny Ghost Williams. "What's she gonna do, give us a pop quiz on feelings?" Ghost, whose pale complexion and silent movement style had earned him his nickname, nodded slowly. "Heard she's never even been on a military base before this assignment. Probably thinks we're all just mindless killing machines." The truth was more complicated than either man realized. Dr. Chen had spent the last 3 years studying combat psychology, interviewing hundreds of veterans, and developing new protocols for mental health assessment in special operations forces. Her research had revolutionized how the military understood post-traumatic stress and combat effectiveness. But, standing on that observation deck, surrounded by officers who questioned her presence, she felt the weight of every doubting stare. Lieutenant Commander Morrison called his team to attention. "Gentlemen, today we're running the full gauntlet. Obstacle course, live fire exercises, close quarters combat, and underwater demolition. Dr. Chen will be observing and may request individual interviews afterward. I expect you to perform as you always do, like the professionals you are." The first challenge was the obstacle course, a hellish maze of rope climbs, wall traverses, and crawling sections designed to break lesser men. Tank led the charge, his massive frame moving with surprising grace through each section. Behind him, Ghost flowed like water over every obstacle, his movements so fluid they seemed effortless. The rest of the team followed, each man pushing himself to maintain the unit's legendary reputation. Dr. Chen watched from multiple vantage points, taking notes not just on their physical performance but on their interactions. She noticed how Petty Officer Third Class Luis Rocket Vasquez, the team's demolitions expert, favored his left shoulder slightly, a telling sign of an old injury he was hiding. She observed the way Chief Petty Officer Michael Reaper Thompson, their sniper, unconsciously checked and rechecked his equipment even during physical training, a behavior pattern that suggested hypervigilance. But what struck her most was the unspoken communication between team members. They moved like a single organism, each man instinctively knowing where his teammates were at all times. When Petty Officer Second Class Alex Spartan Kowalski stumbled slightly on a rope climb, Tank was already moving to assist before Alex even realized he needed help. When Ghost miscalculated a wall jump, Rocket was there to steady him without either man saying a word. After the obstacle course, the team moved to the shooting range. The sound of automatic weapons fire echoed across the facility as each operator demonstrated the marksmanship that had made them legends. Tank, despite his size, could thread a needle at 300 yards. Ghost could hit moving targets in complete darkness using only infrared sights. Each man was a master of his craft. Dr. Chen moved closer to observe their techniques, her presence creating a subtle tension that each operator felt but none acknowledged. She watched Petty Officer Second Class Brian Phoenix Martinez, the team medic, as he switched between different weapon systems with the fluid grace of a concert pianist changing instruments. His shots grouped so tightly that from a distance they looked like a single hole in the target. "Impressive," she murmured, making a note on her clipboard. Tank overheard her comment and felt something unexpected, a small spark of pride. He had spent years perfecting his shooting technique, compensating for his size and the natural tendency for larger operators to struggle with fine motor skills. The fact that this stranger, this outsider, recognized the skill involved meant more than he wanted to admit. The live fire exercise concluded with a complex hostage rescue scenario. The team had to breach a mock building, neutralize multiple threats, and extract simulated civilians without causing collateral damage. It was the kind of operation they had performed dozens of times in real combat situations around the world. Lieutenant Commander Morrison watched Dr. Chen's reaction as his team executed the mission with surgical precision. They moved through the building like ghosts, communicating through hand signals and subtle shifts in positioning. Tank, despite his intimidating presence, showed remarkable restraint when distinguishing between threats and innocence. Ghost seemed to materialize behind enemy positions as if he could teleport. The entire operation lasted less than 4 minutes. How do they do that? Dr. Chen asked quietly, genuinely awed by what she had witnessed. Years of training, Morrison replied. And something else. Something you can't teach in any school. They trust each other completely. Each man would die before letting his teammates down. Dr. Chen studied the team as they regrouped after the exercise. She saw beyond their intimidating exterior to something deeper, a brotherhood forged in the crucible of shared danger. These weren't mindless soldiers following orders. They were thinking, feeling human beings who had chosen to dedicate their lives to protecting others, even at the cost of their own safety and sanity. As the morning progressed into afternoon, the training intensity increased. The underwater demolition exercise tested not only their technical skills but their ability to function under extreme stress. Each operator had to place explosive charges on a submerged target while holding their breath for extended periods, all while maintaining perfect buoyancy and avoiding detection by simulated enemy forces. Petty Officer First Class David Tsunami Chen, no relation to Dr. Chen, was the team's underwater specialist. His ability to remain submerged for nearly 6 minutes while performing complex tasks had saved their lives on multiple occasions. As he glided through the murky training pool, his movements were so controlled that he barely disturbed the water around him. Dr. Chen found herself holding her breath along with the operators as they worked beneath the surface. She began to understand the physical and mental demands these men faced daily. This wasn't just about strength or speed, it required a level of mental control that few people could achieve. Tank emerged from the water last, his massive frame creating barely a ripple as he surfaced. Despite his size disadvantage underwater, he had completed the exercise faster than operators half his weight. The determination in his eyes as he reported mission completion spoke to years of refusing to let his physical limitations define his capabilities. The final exercise of the day was close-quarters combat, hand-to-hand fighting skills that could mean the difference between life and death in situations where weapons weren't available. The team paired off for sparring sessions that would have looked like choreographed violence to untrained observers. Tank faced off against Ghost in what seemed like an impossible mismatch. The smaller operator moved with liquid grace around Tank's powerful strikes, using leverage and technique to neutralize the size advantage. But Tank wasn't just relying on brute force, his movements showed years of training in multiple martial arts disciplines, adapting his style to work with rather than against his natural build. Dr. Chen watched the sparring sessions with growing respect for these warriors. Each man had developed his fighting style to complement his physical attributes while compensating for his limitations. They fought with controlled aggression, deadly techniques held in check by discipline and mutual respect. As the day's training concluded, the team gathered for debrief. Lieutenant Commander Morrison reviewed their performance while Dr. Chen observed their interactions. She noticed how they critiqued each other's techniques without ego or defensiveness. When Ghost pointed out that Tank had telegraphed a particular punch, Tank nodded and immediately practiced the correction. When Rocket suggested a more efficient approach to one of Phoenix's medical procedures, Phoenix thanked him and incorporated the feedback. These men had left their egos at the door years ago, understanding that pride was a luxury they couldn't afford in their line of work. Every piece of advice, every criticism, every suggestion was viewed as potentially life-saving information that could benefit the entire team. Dr. Chen realized she was witnessing something rare, a group of individuals who had transcended normal human limitations through absolute dedication to each other and their mission. They weren't perfect, she had observed signs of stress, fatigue, and old injuries that each man carried. But they had found ways to function as a cohesive unit despite their individual challenges. As the sun began to set over the training facility, Tank approached Dr. Chen for the first time that day. His massive frame cast a shadow over her small form, but his expression was more curious than intimidating. "Ma'am, can I ask you something?" he said, his voice surprisingly gentle for someone of his size. Dr. Chen looked up at him, noting the intelligence in his eyes that belied the stereotype many people held about large, muscular men. "Of course, Petty Officer Rodriguez." What exactly are you looking for? I mean, we all know you're here to evaluate us for something big. Are you trying to figure out if we're crazy enough for whatever mission they have planned, or if we're too crazy? The question revealed a depth of understanding that impressed Dr. Chen. Tank wasn't just a physical specimen, he was a thinking operator who understood the psychological complexities of their profession. I'm trying to understand how you maintain your effectiveness under extreme stress, she replied honestly. How you function as individuals and, as a team when most people would break down completely. Tank nodded slowly. It's not magic, ma'am. We just know that failing isn't an option. Not when lives are on the line. Not when our teammates are counting on us. His simple explanation captured something that hours of psychological analysis had struggled to define. These men operated from a foundation of absolute commitment that went beyond normal human motivations. They had found something worth dedicating their lives to, something greater than themselves. As the team dispersed to clean equipment and prepare for evening chow, Dr. Chen remained on the observation deck, processing everything she had witnessed. She had come to the base with preconceived notions about military culture and special operations forces. What she found instead was a group of extraordinary individuals who had chosen to shoulder burdens that most people couldn't imagine. The real test, she realized, wasn't whether these men were tough enough for whatever mission awaited them. The test was whether she could develop evaluation protocols that would do justice to the complexity of what they had achieved. They deserved better than simplified psychological profiles and standardized assessments. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and deeper insights into the minds and hearts of these warriors. But, already, Dr. Sarah Chen knew that this assignment would change not just her understanding of military psychology, but her entire perspective on human potential and the bonds that could form between people willing to risk everything for each other. The second day began before dawn with a sound that had awakened Dr. Sarah Chen from deep sleep, the rhythmic pounding of boots on concrete as the SEAL team conducted their morning run. From her quarters window, she could see their silhouettes moving through the pre-dawn darkness like disciplined shadows. Each man maintained perfect formation despite the punishing pace that would have left most people gasping for air within minutes. Tank led the formation, his massive frame setting a pace that seemed impossible to maintain. Behind him, the rest of the team followed in perfect synchronization, their breathing controlled and steady. Dr. Chen found herself wondering how many mornings they had started exactly like this, pushing their bodies to the limit before most of the world had even awakened. By the time she reached the training facility, the team was already deep into their morning briefing. Lieutenant Commander Morrison stood before a tactical display showing satellite imagery of what appeared to be a hostile compound in an undisclosed location. The mission parameters were classified, but Dr. Chen could see the complexity in the overlapping security zones and multiple entry points marked on the screen. Intelligence indicates 17 enemy combatants with unknown additional support, Morrison explained. Civilian presence confirmed, including women and children. Rules of engagement are strict, no collateral damage acceptable. Mission timeline is 48 hours maximum from insertion to extraction. Tank studied the imagery with the same intensity he brought to everything else. His finger traced potential routes through the compound while his mind calculated fields of fire and cover positions. Despite his imposing physical presence, his tactical mind was precisely calibrated for this type of complex operation. Ghost leaned forward to examine the building layouts, his pale eyes scanning every detail. Sightlines here and here, he murmured, pointing to elevated positions. Perfect for overwatch, but they'll have counter-snipers in these locations. His voice carried the quiet confidence of someone who had survived dozens of similar operations. Petty Officer Vasquez, the demolitions expert known as Rocket, focused on the structural elements of the target buildings. Load-bearing walls here, he noted, marking his tablet. We could create diversions without compromising structural integrity. Keep the civilians safe while controlling enemy movement patterns. Dr. Chen watched this tactical discussion with growing appreciation for the intellectual demands these men faced. This wasn't just physical courage, it required complex problem-solving under life-or-death pressure. Each operator brought specialized knowledge that contributed to a solution no single individual could have developed. The morning's training exercise simulated the exact scenario they had just briefed. The team would assault a replica compound while Dr. Chen observed their decision-making processes under stress. Hidden cameras and sensors would record every movement, every communication, every tactical choice for later analysis. Tank positioned himself at the primary breach point, his massive hands steady on the door charges that would initiate their assault. Despite the weight of the explosives and entry tools he carried, his movements remained smooth and controlled. Years of training had taught him to use his size as an asset rather than a limitation. Ghost took position on Overwatch, his sniper rifle trained on multiple windows where enemy threats might appear. From his elevated position, he could see the entire compound and provide cover for his teammates below. His breathing had slowed to an almost meditative rhythm that would keep his shots accurate even under extreme stress. The rest of the team spread out according to their pre-planned assault pattern. Each man knew exactly where he needed to be and what his role would be during each phase of the operation. The coordination required was staggering, 12 individuals moving as one unified force toward a common objective. Execute, 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 Morrison's voice crackled through their communication system. The compound erupted in controlled chaos. Tank's explosive charges blew the primary entrance with surgical precision, creating an entry point without damaging the surrounding structure. The team flowed through the breach like water, finding its path, each man covering his assigned sector while advancing toward their objectives. Dr. Chen watched from the command center, studying multiple camera angles simultaneously. She saw Tank move through narrow corridors that seemed too small for his frame, yet he navigated them with surprising grace. His weapon remained ready while his eyes scanned constantly for threats and civilians who needed protection. In the first room, they encountered simulated hostages, training mannequins positioned to test the team's ability to distinguish between threats and innocence under stress. Tank's finger found his trigger guard but didn't enter the trigger well when he identified a non-combatant. His training overrode any instinct to shoot first and assess later. Ghost's voice came through the communication system with quiet precision. Movement, second floor, northeast corner. Stand by. Through his scope, he had identified a potential threat that the assault team couldn't see from their position. Can you confirm hostile intent? Morrison asked. Ghost waited, watching the figure through his rifle scope. In a real operation, this moment could mean the difference between mission success and civilian casualties. Negative hostile intent, he finally reported. Appears to be simulation civilian. The exercise continued for 37 minutes, each phase bringing new challenges that tested different aspects of the team's capabilities. When they encountered a simulated wounded teammate, Phoenix immediately shifted into medic mode while maintaining tactical awareness of his surroundings. His hands worked with practiced efficiency to treat the injury while his eyes continued scanning for threats. Tank found himself in close quarters combat with a simulated enemy, his massive frame adapting to the confined space with techniques he had perfected over years of training. Rather than relying purely on strength, he used leverage and positioning to neutralize the threat while minimizing noise that might alert other enemies. The final phase required extracting simulated civilians while under simulated enemy fire. This was where the team's coordination became most critical, protecting non-combatants while maintaining offensive capabilities against remaining threats. Tank positioned his body between simulated enemy positions and civilian evacuation routes, using his size as a human shield while returning accurate fire. Ghost provided overwatch, his shots eliminating threats that Tank's position prevented him from engaging. The rest of the team moved the civilians to safety while maintaining a defensive perimeter. When the exercise concluded, the team assembled for immediate after-action review. Dr. Chen joined this session, her first direct participation in their operational process. She had pages of observations about their performance, but what struck her most was their approach to self-evaluation. I hesitated 3 seconds too long on the third-floor breach, Tank reported without prompting. Could have cost us the initiative if enemies had been positioned in that corridor. Ghost nodded. My first shot took 0.2 seconds longer than optimal. Need to work on target acquisition speed in low-light conditions. Each team member identified areas for improvement in his own performance before anyone else could offer criticism. Dr. Chen realized this wasn't about ego or perfectionism, it was about survival. In real operations, those 3 seconds of hesitation or 0.2 of a second delay could mean the difference between bringing everyone home and losing teammates. Morrison turned to Dr. Chan. Doctor, what did you observe from a psychological perspective? She chose her words carefully. I saw individuals who have learned to function beyond normal human limitations by accepting complete accountability for their actions. The level of self-awareness and continuous self-improvement is remarkable. Tank looked at her with something approaching respect. Ma'am, in our line of work, good enough gets people killed. We can't afford to be anything less than perfect. The afternoon brought a different type of training: psychological stress testing. The team would face scenarios designed to push them beyond their normal limits, testing not just their physical capabilities but their mental resilience under extreme pressure. The first scenario placed them in a simulated prisoner of war situation. Each operator was subjected to interrogation techniques designed to break their mental resistance. Dr. Chen observed from behind one-way glass as professional interrogators used psychological pressure, disorientation, and stress positions to test the team's ability to maintain operational security. Tank faced his interrogation with the same methodical approach he brought to everything else. When the interrogator tried to use his size against him, suggesting that someone so large must be clumsy and stupid, Tank simply stared ahead without reaction. He had heard every variation of size-based insults throughout his career and had learned to ignore them completely. The interrogator shifted tactics, trying to create doubt about his teammates' loyalty and competence. This approach also failed. Tank's faith in his team was unshakable, built on years of shared danger and mutual dependence. No amount of psychological manipulation could break bonds forged in actual combat. Ghost's interrogation revealed different challenges. His quiet, introspective nature meant he was comfortable with silence, but the interrogator tried to use his pale appearance and nickname to suggest he was somehow less than his teammates. Ghost's response was to become even more still and silent, withdrawing into himself while maintaining complete mental clarity. Each team member faced personalized psychological pressure designed to exploit potential weaknesses. Rocket's love for his family became a tool to try breaking his resolve. Phoenix's medical training created scenarios where he was forced to choose between helping simulated wounded enemies or protecting classified information. Spartan's competitive nature was exploited through suggestions that other team members were stronger and more capable. None of the interrogation attempts succeeded in breaking any team member's mental resistance. Dr. Chen watched seasoned psychological warfare specialists fail against the mental fortitude these operators had developed. Their ability to maintain focus and loyalty under extreme pressure was unlike anything she had studied in civilian populations. The final psychological test was perhaps the most challenging, a scenario where team members had to choose between mission success and teammate safety. This struck at the core of military psychology, the eternal tension between individual loyalty and mission accomplishment. The simulated scenario placed Tank in command of a small element tasked with destroying a high-value target. During the mission, Ghost was wounded and required immediate evacuation that would compromise mission completion. Tank had to choose between saving his teammate and completing their objective. Dr. Chen watched Tank's face as he processed the impossible choice. She could see the internal struggle between his protective instincts toward Ghost and his understanding of mission importance. His training said the mission came first, but his heart demanded he save his teammate. "We find a third option," Tank finally decided. "We complete the mission and get Ghost out. Both objectives are non-negotiable." His solution was to modify their assault plan, using his size and strength to carry both the demolition charges and the wounded Ghost while the rest of the team provided cover. It required superhuman effort, but Tank refused to accept that he had to choose between mission and teammates. Ghost, despite playing the wounded operator, smiled slightly at Tank's solution. They all knew that in real operations, Tank would indeed find a way to accomplish both objectives or die trying. His refusal to accept impossible choices had saved their lives before. The psychological evaluation continued into the evening with individual interviews. Dr. Chen spoke privately with each team member, trying to understand the mental frameworks that allowed them to function under such extreme conditions. Tank's interview revealed surprising depth and complexity. Despite his intimidating appearance, he spoke thoughtfully about the psychological challenges of their profession and the methods he used to maintain mental balance. "People see the size and assume I'm simple," he explained. "Truth is, this job requires constant mental discipline. Every day, we prepare for situations where normal people would break down completely. The physical training is just the foundation. The real challenge is keeping your mind clear when everything is falling apart." Dr. Chen asked about his motivation for choosing such a demanding career path. Tank's answer revealed the philosophical foundation that supported his dedication. "Someone has to do this job, ma'am. Someone has to stand between innocent people and the evil in this world. I happen to be good at it, and I have teammates I trust completely. That's enough reason for me to keep doing it." His simple explanation contained profound truth about service and sacrifice. Tank had found his purpose in protecting others, and that purpose gave meaning to all the hardships and dangers he faced. Ghost's interview showed a different but equally deep commitment to their mission. His quiet nature concealed a sharp analytical mind that constantly evaluated threats and opportunities. People think being quiet means being weak, Ghost observed. In our line of work, silence is often the difference between success and failure. I listen, I watch, I understand situations before acting. That's kept my teammates alive more times than I can count. Dr. Chen realized that Ghost's personality wasn't a limitation to overcome but a strength to be leveraged. His ability to remain calm and observant under pressure made him invaluable to team operations. As the day concluded, Dr. Chen reviewed her extensive notes and observations. She had witnessed extraordinary individuals performing at levels that challenged her understanding of human potential. These weren't superhuman beings, but ordinary men who had chosen to push themselves beyond normal limitations in service of something greater than themselves. Tomorrow would bring the final phase of her evaluation, but already she knew that her recommendations would reflect what she had learned, that some people are capable of remarkable things when they find the right motivation and support structure. The question wasn't whether these men were ready for their upcoming mission. The question was whether the mission was worthy of what they were prepared to sacrifice to accomplish it. The third day brought an unexpected twist that would test everything Dr. Sarah Chen thought she understood about these elite warriors. Lieutenant Commander Morrison received an urgent message during the pre-dawn briefing. Their training schedule was being accelerated due to developing intelligence on their target. The mission they had been preparing for was now imminent. The atmosphere in the briefing room shifted immediately. The relaxed confidence of training exercises was replaced by the focused intensity of actual operational planning. Dr. Chen found herself no longer observing a psychological evaluation but witnessing the final preparation for a real combat mission. Satellite imagery from 18 hours ago shows increased activity at the target compound, Morrison announced, updating the tactical display. Intelligence indicates our window is closing rapidly. We deploy in 72 hours. Tank studied the new imagery with heightened attention. The compound they had been training against was real, located in a volatile region where American hostages had been held for 6 months. Diplomatic efforts had failed, and the hostages' condition was deteriorating rapidly. This mission represented their last hope for survival. The team's entire demeanor changed as they shifted from training mode to operational preparation. Tank's movements became more economical, each action serving a specific purpose in their mission preparation. Ghost's already quiet nature deepened into complete tactical focus. Every team member began the mental transition from preparing for possible scenarios to planning for actual life-or-death execution. Dr. Chen realized she was now observing something unprecedented in her research, the psychological transformation of warriors preparing for real combat. The theoretical had become immediate reality, and she could see the profound mental adjustments each operator was making. Dr. Morrison addressed her directly, your evaluation period is complete. We need your assessment for mission clearance within 24 hours. The weight of responsibility settled on Dr. Chen's shoulders like a physical burden. Her psychological evaluation would determine whether these men were authorized to attempt one of the most dangerous rescue operations in recent military history. The lives of both the hostages and the operators now partly depended on her professional judgment. Tank approached her after the briefing, his expression more serious than she had seen before. Ma'am, I know you've been watching us, trying to figure out if we're ready for this. I want you to know, we've been preparing for missions like this our entire careers. Those hostages have families who are counting on us to bring them home. His words carried the weight of absolute commitment. This wasn't about personal glory or proving toughness anymore. Real people were depending on their skills, training, and psychological resilience to survive an impossible situation. The day's activities focused on final mission preparation rather than evaluation exercises. Dr. Chen observed as the team refined their assault plans based on the latest intelligence. Every detail mattered now: timing, equipment, communication protocols, contingency plans for dozens of possible scenarios. Tank worked with the weapons specialist to select his loadout for the mission. His size allowed him to carry additional ammunition and breaching equipment that smaller operators couldn't manage, but it also meant careful weight distribution to maintain mobility. Every ounce was calculated and justified. Primary breaching charges here, Tank indicated on his equipment layout. Secondary charges for emergency exits. Extra ammunition for sustained firefight scenarios. Medical supplies for battlefield first aid. Ghost prepared his sniper equipment with ritualistic precision. Each component was inspected, cleaned, and calibrated to perfection. His rifle would need to perform flawlessly at extended range under conditions that could include wind, low light, and enemy counter-sniper fire. The psychological pressure was intense. Dr. Chen watched as each team member processed the reality that they might not all return from this mission. Yet none showed signs of backing down or requesting reassignment. Their commitment to the mission and each other remained absolute. Rocket calculated explosive requirements for multiple breach points while considering structural integrity of buildings containing civilians. His work required mathematical precision combined with practical knowledge of materials and blast effects. A single miscalculation could kill hostages or teammates. Phoenix reviewed medical protocols for treating gunshot wounds, trauma injuries, and potential chemical exposure in hostile environments. He packed medical supplies that could mean the difference between life and death for wounded team members or rescued hostages. As Dr. Chen observed these preparations, she realized she was witnessing something remarkable about human nature. These men were voluntarily walking into a situation where death was not just possible but probable, driven purely by their commitment to saving strangers and supporting each other. The afternoon brought final equipment testing and rehearsals. The team ran through their assault plan multiple times, refining movements and timing with each iteration. Tank's role as primary breacher meant he would be first through the door, facing unknown enemies in confined spaces where his size could become a disadvantage. During one rehearsal, Tank's explosive charge failed to detonate properly, forcing him to improvise an alternative breach method. Rather than panicking or calling for support, he smoothly transitioned to manual breach techniques, using his strength and specialized tools to create an entry point. The delay was minimal, but it demonstrated the kind of adaptability that real operations demanded. Ghost practiced long-range shots under various lighting conditions, adjusting for factors that could affect accuracy during the actual mission. His shots had to be perfect. Missed shots could alert enemies, compromise the element of surprise, or endanger hostages. Dr. Chen found herself emotionally invested in their success in ways that surprised her professional objectivity. These weren't just research subjects anymore, they were individuals she had come to respect and admire. The thought of any of them not returning from the mission created an unexpected ache in her chest. Evening brought individual consultations with each team member. Dr. Chen conducted final psychological assessments while trying to maintain clinical detachment. But the boundary between professional evaluation and personal concern had blurred significantly. Tank's consultation revealed his mental preparation for the mission. "I've thought through everything that could go wrong," he admitted. Equipment failures, unexpected enemies, injured teammates, panicked hostages. "I visualized my response to every scenario I can imagine." This mental rehearsal was part of his psychological armor against the chaos of combat. By pre-planning responses to potential problems, he reduced the cognitive load during actual operations. His mind would be free to focus on immediate tactical decisions rather than processing unfamiliar situations. "What about the possibility that you might not come back?" Dr. Chen asked gently. Tank was quiet for a moment before answering. "That's always a possibility in this job, ma'am. But if that happens, I know my teammates will complete the mission and get those hostages home. That's enough for me." His acceptance of potential death wasn't fatalistic resignation but rather a practical acknowledgement of the risks inherent in his chosen profession. He had made peace with mortality in order to function effectively in life-threatening situations. Ghost's consultation revealed a different approach to the same psychological challenges. "I focus on what I can control," he explained. "My equipment, my positioning, my breathing, my shot placement. Everything else is variables I can't influence, so I don't waste mental energy worrying about them." This selective focus was a survival mechanism that allowed him to maintain peak performance under extreme pressure. By controlling what was controllable and accepting what wasn't, he preserved mental resources for critical decision-making. As night fell, Dr. Chen completed her psychological evaluation report. The document would determine whether the mission proceeded with this team or was postponed pending replacement operators. The weight of that responsibility was almost overwhelming. Her assessment was unequivocal: this team represented the highest level of psychological readiness she had ever observed. Their combination of individual mental strength and collective cohesion created capabilities that exceeded normal human limitations. They were ready for this mission in ways that few people could be ready for anything. But, completing the evaluation brought unexpected emotional turmoil. Dr. Chen realized she had become personally invested in these warriors' survival. Professional distance had eroded as she witnessed their dedication, skill, and fundamental decency. The thought of writing reports about their deaths rather than their success was unbearable. Tank found her in the empty briefing room late that evening, staring at the tactical displays showing their target compound. "Trouble sleeping, ma'am?" "I'm thinking about what you're all about to face," she replied honestly. "And whether my evaluation might be sending good people into an impossible situation." Tank sat down beside her, his massive frame somehow non-threatening in the quiet room. "Doctor, we've been preparing for missions like this our whole careers. This is what we do, what we're good at. Those hostages need someone willing to risk everything to save them. But what if something goes wrong? What if my assessment was incorrect and someone gets killed because I cleared you for the mission?" Tank considered her questions seriously before answering. "Ma'am, every mission carries that risk. But the alternative is leaving innocent people to die because we were too afraid to try. That's not acceptable to any of us." His simple explanation crystallized something important for Dr. Chen. These men had chosen to accept risks that others couldn't bear because they understood that some things were worth dying for. Their psychological strength came not from fearlessness but from finding meaning that transcended personal safety. "Can I ask you something personal?" Dr. Chen said. Tank nodded. "Do you ever regret choosing this life? The constant danger, the separations from family, the knowledge that each mission might be your last?" Tank was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer. "I think about my nephew sometimes. He's 8 years old, loves baseball and science fiction movies. He has no idea that there are people in the world who would hurt him just because of where he was born. I chose this life so kids like him can grow up without worrying about those kinds of threats." His answer revealed the moral foundation that supported his psychological resilience. Tank wasn't driven by aggression or violence but by a protective instinct that extended to strangers he would never meet. That sense of purpose provided meaning that made the sacrifices worthwhile. Dr. Chen understood something profound about these warriors that hadn't been captured in any of her previous research. Their psychological strength wasn't derived from emotional detachment or suppression of normal human feelings. Instead, they had found ways to channel those feelings, love for family, concern for innocence, loyalty to teammates, into motivation for extraordinary sacrifice. The next morning brought final mission briefings and last-minute intelligence updates. Dr. Chen watched as the team made final preparations, knowing this might be the last time she saw some of them alive. The possibility created an emotional weight she hadn't anticipated when accepting this assignment. Tank checked and rechecked his equipment with the same methodical precision she had observed throughout the evaluation period. But, now that precision carried additional meaning, any overlooked detail could prove fatal during the mission. Ghost made final adjustments to his rifle scope, calibrating it for the specific distances and lighting conditions they expected at the target. His shots would need to be perfect under circumstances that would challenge even his exceptional skills. Lieutenant Commander Morrison gathered the team for final instructions. "Gentlemen, this is what we've trained for. 12 American hostages are depending on us to bring them home. We go in fast, hit hard, and extract clean. Everyone comes home." The team responded with quiet confidence rather than dramatic speeches or emotional displays. They were professionals preparing to execute another mission, albeit one with exceptionally high stakes. Dr. Chen realized that her presence during these final preparations represented something unique, civilian insight into the psychological reality of special operations. She had witnessed not just their training but their mental preparation for actual combat. As the team prepared to deploy, Tank approached her one final time. "Doctor, I want to thank you for taking the time to understand what we do. Most people see the weapons and the training and think we're just killers. You looked deeper than that." His gratitude was unexpected and deeply moving. These warriors, capable of extraordinary violence in defense of others, valued being understood and appreciated for their underlying humanity. "Bring everyone home," Dr. Chen said simply. Tank smiled, the expression transforming his intimidating features into something warm and reassuring. "Yes, ma'am. That's always the plan." As the team departed for their mission, Dr. Chen remained behind to complete her final reports. But she knew that her understanding of military psychology had been fundamentally changed by this assignment. These weren't just case studies or research subjects, they were extraordinary human beings who had chosen to dedicate their lives to protecting others. The waiting period would be the hardest part, knowing that somewhere in a hostile country, 12 brave men were risking everything to save strangers. Their success would validate her assessment of their psychological readiness. Their failure would haunt her for the rest of her career. But Tang's final words stayed with her, "That's always the plan." These warriors approached impossible missions with the absolute conviction that they would find a way to succeed. That psychological certainty, more than any equipment or training, was their greatest weapon against the challenges they faced. The emergency call came at 0347 hours, jolting Dr. Sarah Chen from restless sleep. Lieutenant Commander Morrison's voice crackled through the secure communication line with news that would change everything she thought she understood about the warriors she had been studying. "Doctor, we need you in the command center immediately. Mission status has changed, and your expertise is required for an unprecedented situation." Dr. Chen dressed quickly and rushed through the empty corridors of the naval facility. The command center buzzed with activity despite the early hour. Multiple screens displayed satellite feeds, communication intercepts, and tactical data from the ongoing rescue operation. The tension in the room was palpable. Morrison met her at the entrance, his expression grim but determined. The team successfully breached the compound and located the hostages. But during extraction, they encountered something we didn't anticipate. The main screen showed grainy footage from Tang's helmet camera. Dr. Chen watched as the massive operator moved through narrow corridors of the enemy compound, his movements precise despite the confined space. Behind him, rescued hostages followed in single file, their faces showing the strain of 6 months in captivity. The complications began here, Morrison indicated, advancing the footage to show Tang stopping suddenly at an intersection. His voice came through the speakers, calm despite the obvious tension of the situation. "Command, we have a problem. Additional hostages discovered, but extraction route is compromised. Request guidance." The tactical situation had become exponentially more complex. Intelligence had indicated 12 hostages, but the team had discovered 8 more civilians, local aid workers who had been captured separately and held in a different section of the compound. The original extraction plan couldn't accommodate 20 people without exposing everyone to unacceptable risk. Ghost's voice provided additional complications from his overwatch position. Multiple enemy vehicles approaching from the north. Estimate 20 additional hostiles, heavily armed. Our window for clean extraction is closing rapidly. Dr. Chen watched Tang's helmet camera as he assessed the situation. 20 terrified civilians, including several who were injured and couldn't move quickly. Enemy reinforcements approaching. Limited ammunition and equipment for an extended firefight. Most military doctrine would recommend abandoning the additional hostages to ensure successful extraction of the primary targets. But Tang was speaking quietly to the newly discovered hostages, his voice gentle despite the tactical urgency of their situation. "We're going to get all of you out of here. Stay calm, follow my instructions exactly, and trust that my teammates know what they're doing." Morrison paused the footage and turned to Dr. Chen. "This is where we need your assessment, Doctor. Tang has made a command decision that contradicts established protocol. He's refusing to leave any hostages behind, even though attempting to extract all 20 significantly reduces their probability of mission success." Dr. Chen studied the tactical display showing enemy positions, friendly forces, and evacuation routes. The mathematics were clear: extracting 20 hostages instead of 12 would require twice as long in a hot zone with limited cover. Casualties among both hostages and operators were statistically likely. What was Tang's exact response when offered the option to extract the original 12 hostages first? Dr. Chen asked. Morrison accessed the communication log. His words were, "Negative, Command. We don't leave anyone behind. All 20 hostages come home, or we find another way." The footage resumed, showing Tang reorganizing his extraction plan in real time. He positioned the strongest rescued hostages to assist the injured ones, creating a human chain that could move more efficiently through dangerous areas. His tactical mind was adapting to impossible circumstances with solutions that pure military doctrine couldn't provide. Ghost sniper fire began eliminating enemy positions that threatened the new extraction route. His shots were perfectly placed, each one removing a specific threat to the expanded group of civilians. The precision required was staggering. Missing any shot could alert enemies to their exact position and compromise the entire operation. Rocket had redeployed to create diversionary explosions that drew enemy attention away from the actual extraction route. His demolition work was artistry under pressure, creating maximum tactical effect while avoiding structural damage that could trap hostages or teammates. Dr. Chen realized she was witnessing something extraordinary about human decision-making under extreme stress. Tank hadn't just made a tactical choice, he had made a moral stand that transcended normal military calculation. The psychological strength required to assume responsibility for 20 lives instead of 12 was almost incomprehensible. The helmet camera showed Tank personally carrying an injured hostage while directing the movement of 19 others through hostile territory. His physical strength was remarkable, but what impressed Dr. Chen most was his mental capacity to track multiple variables simultaneously: enemy positions, team member locations, hostage conditions, ammunition status, time constraints, and extraction routes. Phoenix appeared in the footage, working to stabilize injured hostages while maintaining combat readiness. His medical skills were being tested under the worst possible conditions, treating trauma patients while under enemy fire, with limited equipment and no sterile environment. "How long have they been in the compound?" Dr. Chen asked. Morrison checked the timeline. 47 minutes. Standard protocol calls for extraction within 30 minutes maximum to avoid enemy reinforcement. They were already operating beyond safe parameters, and Tank's decision to extract additional hostages had extended their exposure time even further. Yet the team continued executing their modified plan with the same precision they had demonstrated during training exercises. The footage showed a moment that would define everything Dr. Chen understood about these warriors. Tank encountered a young hostage, perhaps 8 years old, who had become separated from the group during the chaos of extraction. The child was crying and couldn't understand Tank's English instructions. Tank immediately knelt down to the child's eye level, his massive frame somehow becoming less intimidating. He spoke softly, using simple hand gestures to communicate safety and protection. Without hesitation, he lifted the child onto his back, carrying both the boy and his injured adult hostage toward the extraction point. "That's when the situation became critical," Morrison explained, advancing to new footage. Enemy forces had surrounded their primary extraction point. Tank had to choose between fighting through a superior force or finding an alternative route that would take longer and expose them to additional risk. Tank's voice came through the communication system with absolute calm. "Ghost, I need you to paint targets for danger close fire support. We're going to punch through their perimeter and extract via secondary route." The tactical audacity of his plan was breathtaking. Tank was requesting sniper fire close enough to his own position that slight miscalculation could kill friendly forces. But Ghost's response was immediate: "Roger. Trust your movement, trust my shots." Dr. Chen watched the helmet camera footage as Tank led 20 hostages through a hail of enemy gunfire, protected by Ghost's precisely placed sniper rounds that eliminated threats within meters of the friendly forces. The trust between teammates was absolute. Ghost was shooting close enough to Tank that the muzzle blast could be felt, while Tank moved with complete confidence that every shot would find its intended target. The young boy on Tank's back never let go, his small arms wrapped around the operator's neck. Despite the chaos around them, Tank maintained a steady, reassuring presence that kept the child calm. His psychological strength was protecting not just the boy's physical safety but his emotional well-being during the most terrifying experience of his young life. Rocket's voice provided updates on their fighting withdrawal. "Path clear for next 50 meters. Charges set for covering action when you clear the courtyard." The team's coordination under extreme stress was flawless. Each operator was executing his specialized role while adapting to constantly changing tactical conditions. Their training had prepared them for complex operations, but this mission was testing the very limits of human capability. Phoenix appeared in the footage again, now treating a hostage who had been wounded during the firefight. His medical work continued even while moving under fire, applying field dressings and administering pain medication while maintaining awareness of the tactical situation around him. "The critical moment came here," Morrison said, highlighting a specific time marker. Tank had to decide whether to call for emergency extraction that would endanger additional American forces, or continue with ground extraction despite overwhelming enemy resistance. The footage showed Tank in radio communication with higher command. His voice remained steady despite the intensity of combat around him. "Command, we can complete ground extraction of all hostages without additional support. Request you maintain current assets for potential medical evacuation only. He was refusing rescue for his team in order to avoid putting other American forces at risk. The psychological strength required for that decision was staggering, accepting increased danger to himself and his teammates rather than calling for help that might endanger others. Dr. Chen realized she was witnessing the moment that justified everything these warriors had sacrificed to become who they were. This wasn't just professional competence or physical courage. This was moral clarity under pressure that few human beings could maintain. The extraction continued with Tank leading the enlarged group through hostile territory toward their secondary extraction point. Ghost provided overwatch, his sniper fire creating a protective corridor through enemy positions. Rocket used his remaining explosives to collapse building sections that blocked enemy reinforcement routes. But the most remarkable element was Tank's treatment of the hostages throughout the ordeal. Despite the tactical complexity of their situation, he never stopped reassuring the civilians, checking on their condition, and ensuring that fear didn't cause them to make mistakes that could compromise everyone's safety. The young boy remained on Tank's back through the entire extraction, his presence adding weight and limiting Tank's mobility. But Tank never considered leaving the child with other team members or asking him to walk. The operator had accepted complete responsibility for the boy's safety and would maintain that commitment regardless of personal cost. Final phase, Morrison announced, showing the approach to their extraction point. This is where Tank's decision-making was tested most severely. The footage showed their arrival at what should have been a secure landing zone for helicopter extraction. Instead, they found enemy forces had anticipated their route and established defensive positions around the area. The helicopter couldn't land safely with hostile forces in overwatch positions. Tank's response was immediate and decisive. Ghost, can you clear those positions from your current location? Negative. Range is too extreme for guaranteed hits. Need to reposition, but that will take time we don't have. Tank studied the tactical situation for perhaps 10 seconds before making his decision. Team, we're going to assault those positions directly. I'll take point with the civilians behind me. Use my size as mobile cover while Ghost repositions for clean shots. The plan was tactically insane. Tank intended to advance across open ground toward prepared enemy positions, using his body to shield 20 civilians while his teammates maneuvered for better firing positions. The probability of survival for such an assault was negligible. But Ghost's response captured the essence of their team bond. Roger. I'll be ready when you need me. The final assault began with Tank advancing across the landing zone while carrying the young hostage and directing the movement of 19 others. Enemy fire concentrated on his massive frame as he absorbed bullets that would have killed smaller targets. His body armor was designed to stop rifle rounds, but the volume of incoming fire was overwhelming. Ghost's repositioning took 3 minutes that felt like hours. During that time, Tank continued advancing while taking multiple hits that would have dropped normal operators. His size, which had been considered a potential disadvantage throughout his career, was now the only thing keeping 20 innocent people alive. When Ghost achieved his new firing position, his shots eliminated enemy resistance with surgical precision. Each round found its target despite extreme range and difficult shooting conditions. The sniper work was masterful, but it came almost too late. Tank collapsed meters from the landing zone, his strength finally overcome by accumulated damage from enemy fire. But even as he fell, he ensured the young boy landed safely, rolling to absorb the impact and protect the child from injury. The helicopter extraction proceeded under Ghost's protective fire, with Phoenix providing emergency medical treatment to Tank during the flight to safety. All 20 hostages were successfully extracted without casualties, along with all team members. Dr. Chen watched the final footage from the helicopter's medical bay. Tank was conscious despite his injuries, still checking on the young boy who refused to leave his side. The child spoke no English, but had somehow understood that this massive warrior had risked everything to save him. That, Morrison concluded, is the moment that silenced an entire SEAL team. Dr. Chen looked puzzled. I don't understand. Morrison switched to audio from the helicopter during extraction. Tank's voice was weak but clear as he spoke to the young hostage in simple words the child couldn't understand but whose meaning transcended language barriers. You're safe now, buddy. No one's ever going to hurt you again. The boy responded in his native language, words that none of the Americans understood. But Phoenix, who had some knowledge of the local dialect, provided translation. He's saying thank you to the big soldier who carried him to safety. He wants to know if he can stay with Tank because he's not afraid when Tank is there. Tank's response created the silence that Morrison had mentioned. Despite his injuries, despite his exhaustion, despite having just completed one of the most difficult operations in military history, Tank's voice was gentle as he spoke to the child. Tell him that soldiers like us will always be there when good people need protecting. Tell him to be brave, be kind, and remember that there are people willing to fight for him even when he can't see them. The helicopter fell completely silent as Phoenix translated these words. Hardened warriors who had witnessed countless acts of courage were moved to tears by the simple humanity of Tank's message. Dr. Chen realized she had witnessed something that would change her understanding of human psychology forever. These weren't just elite operators or tactical specialists. They were individuals who had found ways to maintain their essential humanity while developing capabilities that transcended normal human limitations. Tank's decision to extract all 20 hostages instead of just the original 12 couldn't be explained by tactical doctrine or operational necessity. It was a moral choice that reflected values more fundamental than military training. The young boy had fallen asleep against Tank's chest during the flight, his small hands still clutching the operator's uniform. Tank, despite his pain and exhaustion, remained perfectly still to avoid disturbing the child's rest. That image, the massive warrior cradling the sleeping boy he had saved, became the defining moment of Dr. Chen's research. She understood that true strength wasn't just physical capability or mental toughness. True strength was the capacity to remain human while doing inhuman things in service of others. Morrison turned off the displays and faced Dr. Chen. Doctor, your evaluation report recommended this team for the mission. Based on what you've observed, do you believe your assessment was correct? Dr. Chen considered everything she had witnessed, the technical competence, the tactical flexibility, the moral courage, and the fundamental humanity that had driven Tank to risk everything for strangers he would never see again. Commander, she replied, my assessment was incomplete. I evaluated their readiness for a military operation. What I witnessed was something much more significant. I saw human beings who have found ways to embody the highest ideals of service while maintaining their essential compassion and moral clarity. Tank had survived his injuries and would recover completely. The young boy he had saved was reunited with surviving family members and would grow up with a story about the gentle giant who had carried him to safety. All 20 hostages had returned home to rebuild their lives. But, for Dr. Chen, the most important outcome was her new understanding of human potential. She had seen what people could become when they dedicated themselves completely to protecting others. Tank and his teammates represented the best of humanity, individuals willing to sacrifice everything so that others could be free. The moment that silenced an entire SEAL team wasn't about tactical brilliance or physical courage. It was about a warrior who looked at a frightened child and saw someone worth dying for, then found the strength to live for him instead. That simple act of humanity in the midst of violence captured everything noble about the human spirit. Dr. Chen's final report would recommend that Tank be promoted and his tactics be studied for future operations. But, more importantly, it would document proof that some people are capable of extraordinary goodness, even in the darkest circumstances humanity can create.